everybody in the U.S. all the news media are talking about, Trump's sudden U-turn, and all of a sudden he's decided to turn against Putin, and isn't this wonderful? And now he's going to arm Ukraine. I would be a little bit cautious about this because Trump says a lot of things and then he doesn't do them. We've seen the back and forth on the tariffs and, all sorts of things. So I think we have to look. I'm just going back a little bit to look at Trump's criticism of Putin sort of in the context. And the context has been, up until now, Trump has pretty much refused to even acknowledge that Russia was the invader. At one point, a few weeks ago, he referred to the conflict as between, he made an analogy with two boys that are fighting each other or something. I mean, he's kind of downplayed just the atrociousness of this Russian invasion. So now, all of a sudden he's saying, well, I'm disappointed in Putin, and maybe he sort of casting these aspersions on him. But I mean, really, it isn't that much, frankly. I mean, and also, and I wouldn't expect Trump to really come out and denounce Putin or the Kremlin. I could be wrong. But also, we have to be careful because Trump is talking about, now we're going to start rearming Ukraine. We're going to get all these Patriot, he alluded to Patriot missiles and the things that Ukraine needs for its air defense. Some of this is already in Poland. But again, how far is Trump going to go? He could easily, in another week, kind of back off and say, well, we've given them enough. And he could back off his criticism of Putin. So at this point, I don't have great expectations.
I think perhaps one of the real significant pointers as to whether he's serious or not might be what he does about sanctions, mightn't it? Because he's saying he's looking very strongly at the Russian sanctions bill that's being proposed by the Senate, and that would impose 500% tariffs on any country that imports Russian uranium, gas or oil. I mean, that would be presumably quite effective, and the proof in the pudding will be, does Donald Trump go with this and put his money where his mouth is and actually does something?
Yes, again, he's having a serious look at the sanctions, and he's going to consider this bill. I am not holding my breath. It would be a very serious step, but I'm not quite sure. I look back on the history of Trump and Putin's relationship, going back to when Trump was first elected and denying that Russia interfered at all in the elections and saying that he believed Putin. I think we need to wait and see. Now, as far as Russia's reaction to this Trump's quote unquote U-turn, it doesn't surprise me that all of a sudden they are just bombing the hell out of Kyiv. Last night, they're doing really, really. I think this was the largest military attack so far. But in a way, for Russia, it makes sense because basically what they're saying is, okay, you want to talk tough with us, but we can show you the damage that we can do to Ukraine right now. And so I think in a way it is kind of a reaction, and Russia doesn't have that much choice at this point. But this is their way of showing, we're gonna fight back.
And what will be really fascinating to see is how Ukraine actually follows up on any attacks into Russia itself, following on from the Spider's Web operation, which must have really rocked the Kremlin in terms of its confidence. And off the back of what happened with the airports this week, I'm just wondering, what kind of operations do you think would be most likely to cause the Kremlin to ask questions about the costs of continuing the war?
Wow. Well, I mean, they've paid so much in terms of costs already. It's almost like getting out now would be such a huge step. Well, I mean, obviously they would go to peace talks and make concessions and so forth. But as you know, thus far, the Kremlin has a red line, and they're not making any concessions. But yes, I mean, I think it was very impressive what the Ukrainians were able to do to smuggle these drones in and set them off. I mean, they're very good with this sort of thing. I don't know. Of course, now Russia is alerted, and they're going to be probably a lot more careful. So I don't think it's clear, how much more Ukrainians can do right now. It would be great if they could continue doing the sort of thing that they've done, and if they were successful in, for example, using drones to destroy all these really important aircraft that Russia has, it would be great. But yeah, that could be an additional factor that might cause the Kremlin to reconsider. But I think also this business about how the public feels about the war is going to really play in.
There's been some keen media attention in recent days to the spate of tankers that have been hit by explosions while either in a Russian port or having recently visited Russia. And in all 6 cases, the latest, the Eco Wizard, 4 had recently visited Libya, and all except the Eco Wizard had a record of anchoring off Malta. And we don't know yet what caused these explosions, but people are pointing to the possibility of limpet mines being stuck onto the bottom of these vessels. And also there has been some kind of out there speculation that this could be kind of like a seaborne development to what happened in Operation Spider's Web. Of course, we don't know yet what's behind all of this, but how closely are you watching these developments?
Well, I think they're very significant. I think the last sort of explosion happened about June 27th. And yes, I mean, these are very significant in terms of the damage that it's done to Russian tankers. And I would say they're more vulnerable because they're not on Russian territory. Some of those explosions could have been linked to Libya, but we just simply don't know right now. But if they were, if it was a Ukrainian job, then that would be the kind of thing that I would expect we would see more of, because this is very, very damaging to Russia to have these tankers blown or have these explosions. So yeah, I mean, I think Ukrainians are very good at this sort of thing.
We shall see and watch the latest updates on that. Just to turn to something that's been happening in London, this week 3 men were found guilty of setting fire to a warehouse housing Starlink satellite equipment destined for Ukraine. One had been recruited by the Wagner mercenary group. How involved is the Kremlin in outsourcing criminal activities to further its strategy, and what is that strategy overseas?
It doesn't surprise me that they would use members of the Wagner group, because they've always done the Kremlin's dirty work, all over Africa, so on and so forth. So I think that if in order for something like this to be done, it's a pretty blatant attack, really, when you think about it, and having it happen, outside London, at this warehouse. I mean, it's pretty bold, but the Kremlin can use these surrogates, and then they can kind of back off, and if they're not tied directly to the Russian military or intelligence or something, they can just deny any connection. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because, when we saw, and this isn't really similar, but when we saw, for example, the poisoning of the Skripals in Salisbury, that was not a very good job that the Russians did, because it was revealed that the two people who carried out these poisonings actually had worked for the GRU, and they could be taught in the GRU. The Russian military intelligence works, for the Kremlin. So those things could be directly tied, and it had big repercussions for Russia. So I think that it's much better for them to have a surrogate, and particularly the Wagner group are well trained, and they've done a lot of this dirty work.